Happy Tuesday, pro-life family. Nancy Pelosi's been denied communion and she is big mad. And Planned Parenthood wants to sexualize your children. We need to talk, guys. Grab your coffee, pull up a chair, let's get started. Happy Tuesday, pro-life family. So, as always, my favorite group of podcast friends, Kim Schwartz, Veronica. You didn't get the black memo today?
I guess not.
Okay.
Blue. Dark blue's close enough.
Breaking the vibe.
That's okay.
Veronica Arnold-Smither, Emily Cook, Brent Klingerman. So let's jump into this crazy... It's hard for me to even read this and just not feel like I live in clown world. We want to talk about what seems to be Planned Parenthood's indoctrination plans.
Well, when your enemy tells you what they're going to do, you better believe them. We have this ongoing conversation in our culture about how the left and a lot of members of the left are trying to sexualize children. There's many forms that this is taking. You see it a lot in the school board meetings and in what's in your kid's library at school. And Planned Parenthood has a hand in this. We've seen this for years. Planned Parenthood,
decades.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would say Planned Parenthood is probably one of the heavier hands in this entire debate. So Planned Parenthood is hosting a conference for teens called VIBE, and that stands for the Virtual Inclusive Bold Education Conference for Teens, to teach them about a variety of things, including sex and the media, porn literacy, gender identity and neo-pronouns, careers in sexual and reproductive health, birth control, and healthy and unhealthy relationships, what that looks like in Planned Parenthood's eyes. So the main question here is, would you trust Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion business, to teach your teens and your children about sex ed?
The answer's not no.
Yeah.
So you're doing it wrong.
You're watching the wrong podcast.
Yes.
Wait, what is neo-pronouns? New pronouns?
New, I guess. Because did you know you can have a pronoun now, clown or clown self? So you talk about living in a clown world. That's like literally people call themselves clown and clown self.
There's
they want
cake
to be
and
referred
cake
to
self
that way.
too, according to TikTok.
Yeah,
so you can identify as other things. We're not going to talk about all of that. 'Cause that
Yeah, let's stick to one of the circuses.
Happy
not
Junior,
all
guys.
Of them.
Yes. Oh dear. Okay. So Planned Parenthood trying to teach your kids about all of this stuff, and Planned Parenthood has an interest in promoting this radical sexual agenda on kids, because guess what Planned Parenthood makes their money on? Abortion. And the more people that they get into their health centers, the more money they're going to make.
Yep.
You mean they're abortion centers?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
they're
you.
not really healthcare centers.
And the earlier you start promoting and encouraging sex, the higher the chances that there's going to be someone's going to have an unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah, and this is
You
my
start at a
point
really
too.
young, impressionable age.
Mm-hmm.
And you just lead them off the track very early.
Yeah, so Planned Parenthood knows that. I think a lot of people are uneasy about abortion. Even people who go to Planned Parenthood might be like, oh, well, I don't support abortion, but I'm coming here. They get kids early on who might not know about abortion or might not be supportive of abortion, but then they'll go with the STI screenings and other legitimate healthcare services that Planned Parenthood does some of those, but their main moneymaker is abortion. So if I can get kids in two ways, either I'm going to get kids early on, or I'm going to get teens and other people through these other legitimate services, so that way I can get those pointed to abortion. At the end of the day, I want all of these people to come to us for abortions.
Yeah. Oh, it's creepy. It also makes me wonder, so I subscribe to Planned Parenthood's emails so I can stay attuned of all this crazy
If
stuff.
you get unsubscribed after this, we'll know.
I know, I might be like, why am I not getting emailed by Planned Parenthood anymore? But it's crazy. I mean, they're marketing directly to teens, and that's not hard to do because you can reach them on all kinds of social media platforms. But at some point, usually a parent has to pay for the ticket to attend the conference or maybe book the flight, or the parent's probably going to be involved at some point. So... Like, who are these parents that are just okay with their teens going to these events? And it breaks my heart. It's probably parents who have been affected by abortion before and they feel the need to justify it. I know so many women still on the other side who, they're vehemently pro-abortion because they have to justify their own experience. And it's terrifying. I mean, they're turning their kids into activists to justify something, hopefully, I pray, these kids have never yet experienced. They've never, some of them might have they might still be too young to have had sex. And that's the whole point. They're trying to teach them now all about it to justify what they did in the past.
What's the starting age for this conference?
This one's for high schoolers,
right?
So 14 and up. But I mean, we already know. I mean, it's been proven that they still write sex ed for Girl Scouts, and that starts at like first grade?
Yeah.
Doesn't Girl Scouts start at first grade?
Yeah.
And I mean, you can go read all about that on the Girl Scouts sex ed website. I mean, that's not hard to find.
Why is Girl Scouts teaching sex ed?
Good question.
That's the million. I mean, Planned Parenthood. This is Planned Parenthood's genius marketing agenda. They just go into these organizations that, they go into schools. Yeah, we need somebody to teach sex ed for us. Here you go, Planned Parenthood. You do it. And Girl Scouts.
Because nobody wants to be the one who has to give that talk, right?
I guess so. But
but even as a parent, you don't really want to, but you doggone better.
Right.
Because if you don't, the internet's a real bad teacher of that. And the school will fill in the blanks for you, apparently, because, you didn't talk to your kids. So I guess we're going to have to do it.
And God forbid, Planned Parenthood is the one that fills in those blanks for you. And that's what they've been doing for years. And, fortunately in Texas, we passed a law a couple years ago in 2019 that said we don't want Planned Parenthood associated with anything to do with tax dollars, and that includes Planned Parenthood cannot come into public schools and teach sex ed. We don't care whatever it is, like Planned Parenthood. Yes, they have a few legitimate health services, but as long as Planned Parenthood is committing abortions, we don't want them to even pave the pothole on our street. They don't get a dime of taxpayer dollars.
That is the most southern phrase. I love it. You don't even get to pave our
You're
potholes.
welcome. Bless your heart.
No, and even the few legitimate health resources that you said that they do offer, you can get those elsewhere, so we don't need Planned Parenthood.
Truth.
Right?
Yeah.
Preach.
And then, I mean, there is such a huge difference in sex ed between teaching biology, anatomy, the beauty of how our bodies actually work, and then crossing the line over to encouraging sex and teaching all about birth control when you're in 5th grade.
Yeah.
What in the world? We don't need that. Our kids don't need to know that until much older, and it's tragic.
We shouldn't have let our schools be in this space to begin with.
Yeah.
Truth.
It's abdication of what we are supposed to be doing as parents.
Because that one way or another, they're teaching values, either your values or against your values. And, I think most people will say they should just be, straight down the line and no opinion or anything like that. And that's more of the biology side of it. But at some point, they always cross the line of, teaching either your values or against your values. And that's the rabbit hole that we've come down. Now, I've got a couple of articles here about Planned Parenthood sex ed programs. We've got this one from our friends at lifenews.com. They're a really great organization. Planned Parenthood launches new sex ed videos targeting 4 to 9-year-old kids. That was in February 2019. So there are tons of examples over this. I remember when I was in college, I read this article about a Planned Parenthood affiliate in some other state trying to teach sex ed to about preschooler, kindergarten level. And my professor was a flaming liberal. She was like, that doesn't happen. This is not true. And I was like, it's right here. They said it.
If they're admitting it, believe them.
Yeah. So, and so you can take one example and maybe your opponent will say oh, well, that's just one. That's just the anomaly. There are examples of this for years, and it goes all the way up to the Planned Parenthood website itself. You were just looking at Planned Parenthood details, how it teaches sex ed on their website. Again.
So it's Planned Parenthood teaches sex education. This is literally their own website. So I really like to go straight to the source anytime there's a question, so that there's not just a rumor, right? Go read their stuff. And it talks about how abstinence-only education doesn't work, and they think that should never never be an option in schools, and so many conservative parents completely disagree with that. And then there's all this stuff about how like conservative lawmakers are attacking sex ed, trying to take it out. And really what we know is we're just trying to stop them from pushing a trans agenda on 4-year-olds. I mean, there's a huge difference. We can teach. I mean, I am actually a fertility coach as a side job, so I'm actually really passionate about biology and really good sex education, but there are so many good ways to do that in an age-appropriate way that don't have an agenda about encouraging sex. And so...
and promoting abortion.
Right, and promoting abortion, yeah. And I work with... you actually have to sign, I don't know the word for it, but some kind of like a contract, if you will, that you, as an instructor in this program that I teach, that you will not refer or promote or any of those things for abortion or abortifacient types of birth control and things like that. And so do the physicians that I work with. And it's wonderful. So if you're looking for good resources, because I mean, not many parents are going to be as eager to talk about biology as I would be. But I was raised by parents who were fine with talking about that. And praise God, because I feel as a really young person, we also grew up on like a baby farm, like a mini farm. Yay. So you get to see stuff happen, right? So, but I grew up with this appreciation that probably most teens were terrified of talking about. And, you know, you hear these horror stories of these young girls who are reaching puberty and they don't know what's happening to them and they think they're dying and no one's ever told them. And that's horrible. Like, I've had friends who literally grew up that way too in my own community, and I could not relate because I grew up as a young kid understanding the biology, and then at an age-appropriate time, my parents told me way more of the backstory, if you will, and it wasn't just biology anymore. It was about the theology and marriage and, you know, procreation and all of that. And, I mean, there are right ways to do this, and there's some really great resources out there. So find a good one. Don't just trust your school to do it for your kids.
You know who knows the right way to do this? Parents.
Yeah.
Not Planned Parenthood.
Kid. Yeah. Not all kids are going to mature at the same rate for that discussion. So you're going to know your kid. Like, one of your kids is going to be totally different than your other kid. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
It's insane. So be on the lookout for that about Planned Parenthood's agenda to push sexualization on kids. We see this everywhere. And again, if there is a single driving force behind this, it's Planned Parenthood. They've been at this decades longer than any of the other new instances of the sexualization on kids. Planned Parenthood has been on it long before anybody else has. And so, you know, we had one of these instances too in Texas of the State Board of Education trying to put pro-abortion textbooks in the list of approved reading materials for public schools. And so it's just one of those simple ways of like books that are in your kid's library and, oh, we're going to have a presentation today. Oh, it's by Planned Parenthood. Oh, wait.
We're going to have a guest teacher and they're from Planned Parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
Books that are in your kid's library turn into a really sneaky way to get things in front of them that they are not ready for, should not be seeing. Because I know we've had more than one book come home that I'm like, hold on, what you reading?
Yeah.
And in your city libraries.
Yeah.
We fought that battle. We're still fighting it in Liberty, where they're just slipping in books all the time. That you're like, I'm sorry, this is not for children, and it's definitely not in my community.
Yeah, for sure. It's so crazy, and it's an opportunity, I think, for the pro-life movement and just all of the parents to stand up and say what is right or what isn't right for your kids to be exposed to.
Yep. And also, you can't give them an inch. So they'll sit here and say, "Oh, well, we can come in and do your sex ed." And yes, of course, we don't. The administrators will try to pacify the parents and say, you know, abortion. We can't talk. They can't talk about abortion by state law. Blah blah blah. Okay, well, they do it anyways.
Yeah.
What are you're gonna police it? And this, how much does your children just get from you? Absorb from just being around you and your worldview, and then they're going to be exposed to that 8 hours a day.
Yep.
You just can't even let them in.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of mass book burning.
Right.
Like some people who might want to take some of this conversation out of context on the internet. Not that the internet ever takes anything out of context.
Never. Not a single time.
There are things that are age appropriate, and there are things that are not.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
there
we
are
believe
things
in free speech.
Yep, there are things that you don't teach children because they're not ready.
Sex ed at 4 years old? Our sons are 4.
I know. It's terrifying to think about that. Yeah. Yeah. And I have a little bit of a story. I remember when I was a freshman in college, I met a girl who we became friends pretty quickly. We were in some activities together outside of class. And one day she really opened up to me about how she had been assaulted in high school. And it was really tragic. And that was actually the defining moment when I decided to get super involved in the pro-life movement. So God works in mysterious ways, and he used her story to help me launch this passion of mine. But her story, the way it unfolded is she had known about Planned Parenthood from years prior because they did sex ed in her school, in her local high school up in Texas. This was in Texas. And so I asked her, what did you do after you were assaulted? I mean, did you talk to your family? I mean, you must have been reeling. And she said, I couldn't tell my parents. They would have been upset with me. And that also, there's been a movement to combat that victim shaming. Victims should never be afraid to ask for help. And I'm sure her parents, looking back, they would not have been upset with her at all. Mm-hmm. It wasn't her fault, but she had been led to believe that, victim shaming was legitimate and she should be shamed. And so I said, that's so sad. What did you do? And she said, well, I went to Planned Parenthood. They're the ones who really helped me. And I was already pro-life and I already knew about Planned Parenthood, but I was, oh my gosh, what? And I was like, well, what did they do for you? And so they did the rape kit and they gave her birth control. And
That's
not help. And I was just trying to be her friend and I was just consoling her in that moment. But internally I was reeling. That's not help. That's not help.
So here's you some pills in case you get raped again?
Right. And she was like 15 when this happened. But the only reason she knew about Planned Parenthood in the first place is because they had done her sex ed in middle school. Mm-hmm. And they told her, if you ever need help, come to us. And she believed them. And this poor girl, oh my God. It was awful.
No police report?
Terrible. No, none. And I asked her, would you ever? And she said, oh no, I'm afraid they'd hurt me, hurt my family. And that's a real fear, but I mean, that can be dealt with. I mean, we have restraining orders, we have, police enforcement. There's all kinds of things that could have helped her. But no, she swallowed the pill. She believed what Planned Parenthood taught her in middle school. And I mean, this is the real indoctrination.
Well, it's because they're coming in on behalf of the school. They've been given a position of authority, and everything in our culture says, oh, respect authority, respect your teachers, respect police officers, respect people in authority. We've given them authority for a reason, right? And that's the trick, is get in and be a representative of authority, and the kids will just go, okay, I guess I'm supposed to listen.
They crave good leaders, and anyway, it's awful.
Yikes.
We have a lot of work to do. Keep Planned Parenthood out of your schools.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we get to our next topic here, I do have some important calls to action for you that we need to share.
Texas Right to Life is facing 14 lawsuits from Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. They're suing us because we helped pass the Texas Heartbeat Act, and they're trying to scare us pro-lifers into backing down. Please join us in the fight against Planned Parenthood and donate to protect the Texas Heartbeat Act. You can fight for the unborn and build a pro-life Texas that values every human life. Go to texasrighttolife.com/lawsuit to make your contribution. Every cent will help, and it's greatly appreciated.
Social media companies are hiding pro-life content from you. Fight back against big tech. Text pro-life to 40237 for direct access to the best pro-life news. Since 2019, our web traffic has been down 90% because of big tech censorship. Stay ahead of the censors. When you text pro-life to 40237, you're in control, not some algorithm telling you what you can and cannot see. Join now. Text pro-life to 40237.
Welcome back, Pro-Life family. So we are tight on time, but we need to cover some other things that have happened. Firstly, Nancy Pelosi had a hissy fit when she got denied communion. Kim,
it's
would
about
you like
time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Says the
From the
non-Catholics.
Protestants.
I love it.
Yes.
Okay,
They're the Catholics over here happy about it, and they're even the non-Catholics are happy. I'm like, yeah.
Well, let's look at this. Okay, so a lot of people have been following the story. My aunt and my mom text me all the time about it because it's important. So we have this article from TexasRightToLife.com. Nancy Pelosi fires at San Francisco Archbishop for denying her communion. Let's look look at what this inflammatory statement was from the Archbishop of San Francisco, which is where Nancy Pelosi resides. After numerous attempts to speak with Speaker Pelosi to help her understand the grave evil she is perpetrating, the scandal she is causing, and the danger to her own soul she is risking, I have determined that she not be admitted to Holy Communion. And so he makes the point that he's tried to reach out to her, and it's not a political thing. And that's what the left tries to argue of, oh, you're just politicizing the church. The church needs to stay out of politics. She is causing scandal to Christians everywhere, and
By
her
promoting abortion.
yes, and her
professing
own
to be a
soul.
Christian.
Yes,
Yeah.
her own soul is at risk too by leading other people to think abortion is okay. Nancy Pelosi says she's a good Catholic and that she's still participating in the church and everything. So it must be okay if I have an abortion.
But it leads non-Catholics to possibly misunderstand that all Catholics are okay with abortion, which is not true. And it's, I mean, it's literally against the Ten Commandments. Every Christian should be against abortion.
Yeah.
Well, okay, here's my hot take from non-Catholic view here. She wants to be Roman Catholic, then she needs to choose that, or she can support abortion. Like, you can't have both. And the entitlement of I can't have both because I'm Nancy Pelosi, I'm a Speaker of the House, that just goes to show what the political elite, the entitlement nature that they have. It's more of a, she's not going to answer the Archbishop's phone calls, which as a Roman Catholic, you should.
Especially as a political leader with such weight. I mean, she should be having regular meetings with her church leader.
Correct.
I mean, if my pastor calls me, I'm going to answer the phone.
Same here. My priest, he's not the Speaker of the House, but I'm going to take his calls.
I mean, I love my pastor, but sometimes I do hit the decline just to voicemail. But then I call him right back. But
Sorry, Emily's
funny.
pastor.
It's all right.
we run on different schedules.
It's just between us.
But anyways, this entitlement, and then when he dares to enforce what is under his authority, who gets to come to Holy Communion based on fidelity to your religion's belief, then it's, how dare you?
And I like how you put that, because the word communion literally means common union. Whenever you take communion, and like we've said, we're all different denominations, but I think every Christian church can agree that there is a significance to communion. No matter what you believe about the substance of communion, we believe in the significance of communion, that everywhere, every church, taking part in this ritual is important. So communion means that whenever I take this bread and this wine, I am publicly saying that I am in agreement with everything that this church says, with everything I believe in Jesus Christ. He is my Savior. I believe in the Trinity. And we as Catholics, we have a lot of what we profess to believe with the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Whenever you say yes to that, you're saying yes to everything. You don't get to pick and choose what part of the faith.
But she and Biden are literally picking and choosing. I mean, they say, oh, the church, policies need to be updated. I'm like, well, there's no policies to update. It's just Christ's teaching. We're not updating that. And it's embarrassing. I feel embarrassed for her.
You know what else? People will say, well, the church needs to get with the times. Well, you know what? It's good that the church is always against the culture, because historically, the culture has said that slavery is okay. Whenever the Holocaust happened, many churches were silent. So if the church got with the times for those grave evils, then we would be condoning very terrible human rights abuses, even if those human rights abuses are popular, like what we have right now.
Abortion.
So, yes.
And if you're a Christian and any other, a non-Catholic Christian, this is relevant to you, and you should care, and you should be happy and thankful, because just like you said, when church leaders actually stand up for what the Bible teaches, then that's going to have a ripple effect. It's going to embolden other preachers, and that's what we as a Christian community need to be doing in this time, is being bold.
It sounds like iron sharpens iron.
Ooh.
Someone should write
Quote
that
the
down.
Bible.
Someone should write that down.
It's already in the book.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
you're
So
probably
y'all
right.
are not Catholic. Tell us why you care.
I just did.
There
well,
you go.
your turn. Okay,
Well,
Brent, your turn.
And okay, a certain writer of 2/3 of the New Testament, by the name of Paul, had some really spicy takes on how you should get yourself straight before you go to communion. Like, you need to look at your life and ask for forgiveness and get all these recent things that you've been struggling with, like take that to God, then go to communion. Then there's some notes in there about eternal damnation and drinking that unto yourself, etc., etc. You can go read it for yourself. You should read it for yourself if you haven't already.
Nancy Pelosi, please read it.
This is kind of the one thing Jesus, the completer of the law, left us this tradition. He left us a prayer and this tradition, and those common traditions make us one body, and we have gotten away from any respect of that.
We have. It's a sense of entitlement. And we had James Stewart talk. He's a biblical counselor, talk at our Boots on the Ground conference a couple years ago. And something he said always stuck out to me. And he said that if you look at, the God that I would worship would be okay with abortion and would be okay with this and this and this, and you make this list of what you want God to believe in order to worship him, you're not worshiping God. You're worshiping yourself.
Yeah. You're making your own list of what God should be in your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds a
Yeah.
lot like God is like you.
I had a difficult conversation with one of my children who was acting terribly over the weekend. And I was like, Jesus summarized the law with, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbors yourself. And we're like, and the satanic law is summarized as do as thou wilt. Mm-hmm. So which one of these laws do you want to follow, child? And she was just like, So
You're doing dad life right, sounds
right? So I'm trying, guys. It ain't easy. But that's our church culture though, is getting into that. Well, but it's okay for me and it works for me. It's like, no.
Right. And I've heard so many people, Catholics and non-Catholics alike, who just completely misunderstand the point of communion. Common union, yes, of course. But there's more to it than that, especially for Catholics. We believe that the bread and wine miraculously turns into Christ's body and blood, and that it is truly a miracle at every Mass. And so if you were to receive this literal body and blood of Christ, that you're taking in Jesus into your own body. And so so these pastors, these Catholic leaders are saying you can't do that if you're lying to Christ that you also support him when you support abortion. You can't take Jesus into your body and soul and say, but I don't believe you on everything.
Yeah.
It is so disrespectful. It is a sin. And so pastors, these bishops and church leaders are trying to urge people to repent. And actually, I need to go fact check this name, but I heard a story not too long ago of a pastor from several decades ago who told a political leader the same thing. I urge you to repent. I urge you to stop supporting abortion. And in the meantime, you cannot have communion. And the politician actually repented and changed his policies and became a pro-life politician. And I need to go look up this name. Maybe we can put it in the notes below.
Yeah.
But I was so encouraged by that because I could easily imagine Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden saying, never, how dare you, that entitlement comes back in. I hope that they would see this as for what it is. It's an urge, call to action to repent. And if they rejoin the church, then of course they should receive communion. I pray that happens. At this moment, I'm not feeling very optimistic about it. And then for non-Catholics, communion is so significant. I believe it's correct to say that you view it more of as a symbol of Christ's body and blood and not the miraculous event of turning into the body and blood. However, that symbol is, even if it were just a symbol in the Catholic Church, that's incredibly important. I have to reiterate that it is not a symbol, but it's so important.
Something I learned my pastor was teaching about some months ago, that it was Galilean tradition that at engagement, the future wife, the bride, would be given kind of terms of the marriage and the contract with a glass of wine. And if she accepted and drank it, then the marriage was happening. And so all the control was given to her in that moment.
That's so cool.
And so this was a Galilean tradition. And so you've got Jesus in this region, growing up in that, and now is offering his disciples this glass of wine. He's offering them the marriage contract.
Yeah.
So for
or
us,
covenant.
this is
Yeah,
yes,
the marriage covenant.
this is we are entering into a marriage contract. So if you're entering into a marriage contract with Jesus, that's serious.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's like
You
I
have to
accept
be
your
one.
covenant. I accept you entirely, not just a list of ideas or principles, but I accept all of you and I give you all of me. I mean, that's what marriage is, and that's what the communion should be.
Don't they also say don't go into a marriage expecting to change the other one? I'm not married, so that's what I hear. So if you're doing that with Jesus, it's not going to work out any better than
funny.
your aunt or whoever.
That's funny.
The daily struggle.
Almost 17 years over here. Yeah.
I'm only 5 years in and
my
I'm still
poor wife.
struggling with that. My poor husband.
But okay, so like we've noticed that abortion rightfully has become a wedge issue. I think people often use that phrase as a negative of like, abortion's just a wedge issue. It's supposed to be a wedge issue. This is life and death.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that in the church. We've seen courageous bishops like Archbishop Cordileone who denied Nancy Pelosi communion. But then the other side of it is you got weak bishops who and weak priests. One of our coworkers, Nathan here, actually went to a church a couple years ago, and the priest opened his sermon by saying, God is pro-choice. At best, it was a bad pun.
That's blasphemy.
At worst, it's blasphemy. I don't know what this guy intended, but yes, it's a wedge issue. You're going to have people coming out on both sides. Either this issue is not important and abortion is good, or abortion is evil and all churches should be talking about it. Which leads us to our next kind of thought. The Methodist Church had some action going on here in Texas.
Yeah, so I mean, the abortion as like what you say, an issue in the Christian community. It's not just rooted. It's not just present in the Catholic community, but in Protestant communities, and it's something that the Methodists, because it's biblical. Like opposition to abortion is biblical, and that's why we're having this. Why it's such an issue in Christian communities. But the Methodists have long been fighting this battle over sexual ethics. So abortion and LGBTQ plus ZXY, whatever it is,
Divided by
that has dominated almost about the last 2 decades. Yeah. And so, I started paying attention to it when I was in high school and started reading, our book of discipline in the Methodist Church that clearly outlines both of those items, like that abortion is bad. Because I started hearing about it, right? Hearing that, abortion is okay in the Methodist Church. I'm like, wait, what do our rules say, right? So, anyways, but
lawyer brain coming in really early
on.
How old are you?
Love it.
I was because I was in our church library, and I would, when my mom's like working at the church doing stuff, I'm like reading the book of discipline in our little church library.
Oh my gosh, I love this. This should be a meme.
I thought I was a nerd.
We'll work on
Jeez.
that.
Okay. Well, so it has finally happened. It has been about where the church is going to split in two, because it's fundamental. It's do you believe what the Bible says on a whole host of issues? Because we've got Methodist churches out there and the seminaries teaching that, Paul wasn't necessarily right, or these the stories in the Bible, not really true. So you've got complete blasphemy going on, but the most visual representation of that is the debate over sexual ethics, abortion, and homosexuality, and so the national conference. There's been a delegation between the conservatives and the liberals, and a contingent of each trying to find this pathway forward to separate, because what's at stake is all the smaller churches would lose their pensions for their pastors, and the property would be deeded to the national church. And so trying to find a way forward with those two items.
Great divorce all over again.
Correct. And so this committee found a way forward, but COVID happened, and the national leaders kind of felt that that's the perfect excuse. So they keep pushing the meeting, essentially. They just keep kicking it down the road each year. And finally what happened this year was the Texas Annual Conference that just happened last week, held conference here in Houston. And, it is Texas is offering churches who want to exit, the favorable terms that have been kicked down the road for national aspect, the national aspect. And so that was kind of the big deal last week, was discussing showing churches, the timing and how to exit. We passed a resolution at annual conference that would essentially make it less of a bite for the smaller churches and their pension obligations, like making it more practical to go, because it is there is no reconciliation. You either believe the Bible or you don't. So
my gosh.
That's just
I wonder what the people are.
So the new conservative church that believes in the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of life, it's called the Global Methodist Church.
Cool.
And they launched just about a month ago officially. So that's what's all happening.
Woo!
Dang.
Thanks for the skinny.
Yeah.
It's a hot mess, but we want to think, the denominational churches had it figured out. It's the non-denominationals that are all loosey-goosey. And the mess is everywhere.
Yes.
Theology has been in the schools for a long time now. And
Here's
the laity lost control of the church and quit
Yeah.
having a voice and let college professors tell pastors
for
what
sure.
to think.
And here's very clarity. It's called, the conservative aspect is called the Global Methodist Church, because if it had not been for the African contingent of Methodist churches, we would have lost this fight a long time ago.
Wow.
So
It's true.
that was one reason, like during COVID, trying to get not have conference, because you had to physically you need to come over. Those delegates need to come over and help save the church.
Wow,
Seems
so would you
important.
say the African delegation is pro-life?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Man, we need to do something with Africa. I don't know
trip.
what. Okay.
Good
I got connections. We could go back. That's another story for another time. I've been there a few times.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's good times. They're good people. I actually spent some time with those Methodist people
Nice.
many years ago.
That's wonderful. We
good
also
people.
there's an African bishop in the Catholic Church who has also rose to prominence in the global light because he is so pro-life. So sounds like we should get all these people together.
Right.
I think so. But our time, unfortunately, has to come to an end. We are out of time. I'm looking at the clock. Today is such a full day.
But guess what? We have Dr. John Seago in the office with us today. So right after we're done with this, we're going to go to lunch, and then we're going to come back and film another episode with Dr. Seago, taking advantage while we have him in the
Right.
house. So, sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, that's great. Yes, Dr. John Seago next week on the podcast. But until then, thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, review, give us all the hearts and the shares and the stars and all those things. And we will see you next week.